You have the life bulb behind you. It makes it look so beautiful and yellow.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. We are here at our Lyfebulb Live, and this week it's really interesting because we are here with our winner from the Lyfebulb CSL Behring Innovation Challenge with focus on organ transplants. Minnie Sarwal from Nephrosant. Really excited to have you here, Minnie.
Thank you.
And we also have our wonderful, one of our wonderful judges, but also Lyfebulb chairman, Dr. Steve Squinto from OrbiMed. Here.
Great.
Welcome, Steve. And we have one of our patient ambassadors and champions, Alicia, who is herself an organ transplant recipient.
So happy to be here.
And we're also joined by a second judge, our friend John Consol from Havas, who represents really commercial thinking. So welcome everyone. It's exciting to see you again. It's not been that long since we had those 2 days of a great challenge and lots of wonderful companies competing in the area of organ transplant. So, you know, I gotta say, I gotta give the floor first to Minnie. To talk about briefly, what is it that your technology, your company does for patients?
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for CSL Behring and the Lyfebulb Challenge, really for organizing, I think, a tremendous, I think, program for all of the other entrepreneurs who came and actually presented very exciting technology. And it was a privilege to be really part of that group. So I'm sure any selection of any winner would have been incredibly difficult. But so I'm really honored to have Nephrosant receive this this winning kind of prize here. Nephrosant is really a culmination of years of work that I've been doing while I was at both Stanford and now at UCSF, working on trying to really address the challenge of early detection of kidney transplant rejection, problem that really impacts the life of the organ if not detected and treated early. And it's been a huge challenge for us because of the late detection. The life of the transplant organs are limited. And so we have spent many years understanding that injury and then understanding how to recognize that injury.
And then can I ask you a question? When you say the life is limited, meaning that if someone like Alicia, who's very young, or even younger, gets a kidney, that could mean that they would need more than one per lifetime. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in fact, I'm also a adult and pediatric transplant nephrologist, and so I've taken care of children as young as 1 year of age that have actually received a kidney transplant, and some of these children will receive 4 kidney transplants in their lifetime because of the finite life expectancy because of really undetected rejection injury that damages these organs.
So that's extremely practical. It's also one thing that we take very seriously in our challenges is that we always look for the patient impact. You know, it has to be high technology, high innovation, and obviously leadership and so on. But the eventual patient impact is important. Alicia, you being a liver transplant recipient, do you can see the potential of this at least for kidney?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's something they warned me about from the very beginning is take care of your kidneys because, you know, now I'm at a higher risk for needing a kidney transplant down the road. And it's so encouraging to hear things like this and to know that my future is looking
so Alicia, why is it that you are at higher risk for a kidney transplant when you have a liver transplant?
So because I had my liver, I'm on a very high level of immunosuppressants, and all of the drugs that I'm on also are affecting my kidneys. That's not just isolated to my liver.
Right. So that's actually a really critical problem. And Steve, being someone who's developed drugs and started companies, now several companies, just recently a new one, you know, this area of transplant has been something you've been interested in for a long time. Isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely. Back when I was at Alexion developing drugs to block complement activation, which is one of the issues among many that we face in the world of organ transplantation, it seemed pretty apparent to me that we need better approaches to keep our organs alive after transplantation. Yeah, immunosuppressant drugs work, but they take their toll. And so I think, what was exciting for me about this summit was just all the innovative ideas around transplant. It was not, I'd have to say, as a drug developer, when you look at all the fields of drug development, oncology, so forth and so on, hematologic disorders, transplant hadn't been one of those fields that's seen a lot of innovative approaches in recent years. So this was really a lot of fun, not only Nefrosant, but the other competitors in this game where, it's such great, interesting ideas and new ideas in this really important field. Absolutely. It was great to see.
And, John, you have also been in the transplant space, but from a different perspective, maybe not as a drug developer, but looking at drugs in the commercial space. Do you also see, why do you think there's been really nothing for so many years, and now it seems like companies are working on transplant again? And is it the science that has moved? Are patients demanding better treatments? What's changed?
I think for certain that the patient demand has dictated that we as an industry have to respond. And I think I echo Stephen from this particular challenge. We saw innovation considerations across a spectrum of services and a spectrum of organs, and I think we're seeing that pharmacologic advances are certainly picking up. We're seeing in heart failure that advance, and that's translating downstream to improvements on the front end of heart failure management, leading to considerations in on the transplant side. But Dr. Sarwal and the Nefrosant technology really is showing how we have to be that much more vigilant about detection of injury and prediction of what is to come. Looking at, I'm even interested, and I've talked with Dr. Sarwal and her team since the Innovation Challenge about how her technology might contribute to earlier identification of risk before you get to end-stage renal disease, or you get to the point of needing the kidney transplant. And I think those are some areas where we have to continue to explore.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just wanted to add, I think the beauty is that we look at a urine sample and we collect it using the kit that we've developed with the preservative solution that allows no processing and stabilization of these markers really at ambient temperature, so that it can be shipped just by routine FedEx. But I think the assay really, because it is the cornerstone, is to pick up very, very early kidney damage. I think just as John was saying, we are able to pick up kidney injury in the native kidney, like means before transplant, but at very, very early stages. So therefore, hopefully revolutionizing the way we can understand and mitigate injury in diabetes and hypertension and other immune-mediated diseases, which, if left unchecked, will actually result in progression to chronic kidney disease and end stage. And then once you have the transplant, we have the same platform technology that uses AI-based different algorithms that now produce very, very early detection of kidney transplant rejection. So we hope to be impacting the health of the kidney both before as well as after transplant.
Can I expound on that a little bit? Because it reflects back, Karin, on your prior question about why hasn't there been so much innovation in the transplant field. What I heard from transplant physicians, maybe 10 years ago when we were thinking about getting into the business at Alexion was, well, if you look at generally 1-year organ survival data, it looks pretty good across most organs. with maybe lung being a bit less than other organs. Even when you look at 5 years survival, it looks okay, right? It's not perfect, but it looks okay. So if you're a drug developer, now you've got to think about going into a market or going into a clinical development strategy where maybe your readout is a 5-year endpoint. And that is a daunting task if you're developing drugs. However, what you just said, in terms of your technology, Minnie, and how that changes the landscape, if you have technology to get earlier readouts on the health and functioning of an organ, that's going to attract drug developers into the field, because now they can do a trial and maybe they're looking at a 6-month endpoint or a 1-year endpoint versus a 5-year endpoint. That completely changes the landscape of who's likely to jump in with sort of innovative new developments. So technologies like yours are not only important to the patient, but they're equally important to the field because it moves the field forward.
Absolutely.
It's really well said, Steve. Really well said. Yeah. Minnie? No, I got to say, I'm very interested also in the early detection of kidney injury pre-transplant, because it's frustrating for patients to be told that you're at an irreversible stage of kidney failure, right? There's when you're diagnosed and it says, okay, it's just a matter of time before you need dialysis or you need a transplant, and there's absolutely nothing we can do. If it had been detected earlier, there would probably have been things to do. And to Steve's point, companies would come in and actually try to find solutions. So it's really important, and it is important for you, Minnie, I think, to get out there and talk about your test as you grow, so that you do partnerships with companies that are also therapeutic, and that they get funding from VCs such as Steve Squinto's company, as well as getting companies like John's behind it eventually when you need to launch the product.
Absolutely. And I think just like we talked about the dearth of innovation with regards to new drug development in transplant, there's also been very little drug development in nephrology, right?
Yeah.
We basically have not been able to come up with medications that will reverse renal injury. And of course, we've had some recent stuff like the SGLT inhibitors. Yeah, but we really should be having so much more development. We hope that our technology, by really picking up injury early and providing a very accurate readout of response, will therefore really facilitate this.
No, that's an excellent point. We were also at Alexion involved in developing our drug for several, kidney disorders, and it was really disheartening to learn, at the FDA that, for example, in lupus, proteinuria was not going to be an acceptable or approvable endpoint. So with an unwillingness to look at biomarker data, but I think that has changed. Proteinuria now is an approvable endpoint in lupus and lupus nephritis, and the more technologies, many like yours, evolves and can show good correlation to longer-term clinical outcomes, that does open up the field very much. And I think your point about nephrology being right there with transplant is right on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Alicia and I, because I also have a kidney transplant, could agree that this is very important, because when you're told that your drug that you're taking to preserve your organs is actually killing, your kidney, it is pretty depressing. Yeah. And there's absolutely nothing you can do. Right, Alicia?
Yeah. There's a lot of fear surrounding that. Is okay, I got past this hurdle, but now what's next? And is there hope for the rest of my life? Or it's very daunting.
Yep. Yeah. And you're also been taught maybe that if you behave well, if you are adherent, you take your drugs, then things will be okay. Yeah. But if you take that very drug, then it continues to decline.
Well, and Karin, I was just going to mention there's, an area that I'm particularly interested in is in some lysosomal storage disorders, rare diseases like Fabry, where there is a recognized impact on kidney function within the patient journey, but there are several thousand patients in the United States that have been diagnosed with a disease like Fabry disease, but are not currently receiving any treatment. They are progressing silently. Their kidneys are deteriorating year over year and decade over decade. I think it's something like, around the median age of dialysis or kidney transplant in a Fabry patient is 38 years old. And with those many hundreds or thousands of patients that aren't being treated, something like what Dr. Sarwal and her team have created may be able to help us to more easily monitor than invasive blood tests through urine tests that progression and get them to that urgency of getting them treated sooner.
Absolutely. And I think in transplant recipients, our patients also face the reverse problem. I mean, we're talking about early detection of rejection, but the assay that we've developed, which is QSUNT, also produces very high confidence of absence of rejection. And I think that cannot be underscored in its importance, because we want to drive immunosuppression to the need of each person, which can be quite different. And I think avoiding over immunosuppression is equally important because of the risks of cumulative malignancy and infections and etc. So we hope that it kind of, the Q score that comes out from this test almost provides like a PT-PTT for anticoagulation. It's almost like we're running transplant, like we're giving anticoagulation and then waiting for our patients to bleed or clot, or you have an infection or malignancy or rejection, and we detect it so late. We should be having something that allows us to proactively be able to tell where your safety threshold is and to titrate your immunosuppression to that need. But you can't do that unless you have something that very accurately reads out your risk of rejection. And I think
it's a really good point, Minnie, because currently the FK value, I mean, that is provided with tacrolimus dosage is just different doctors have different levels, different ranges, and there's really not much science in what you should be at, depending on, of course, the time post transplant. So yeah,
well, even more totally, but even more importantly, if you look at some of our patients who maybe are not that keen to take their medications regularly, but if they take their medication the night before they go for a lab, they're going to have a great tacrolimus level, and we're going to congratulate them. But actually, that transplant is facing the accrual of chronic injury because it never saw regular immunosuppression, and I think we can uncover that with the urine test.
Yep. Thank you. So, Alicia, being the patient in this group, what else during the challenge, what else did you see that you felt would have an impact on you in the immediate term, or that you felt was very impactful for patients? Because there were 11 companies in the finalists.
Yes, and getting the chance to talk to the finalists, I describe it to people as Transplant Disneyland, because I was so happy knowing that there's all of these people fighting for my future, and that I'm going to get a better shot not only at surviving with my transplanted liver, but also, potentially not needing a kidney transplant in the future, or people that are working on so I don't have so many side effects with my anti-rejection meds. And it just made me feel really hopeful, all the finalists with their presentations about the future and what it means for me and what it means for transplant patients that are coming after me.
There's something special about the patient entrepreneur, and Minnie, you're a great example that your whole life has been dedicated to patients, and you want to make a difference. Steve, you've been part of many of these challenges, and the idea that someone who faces hurdles in their life as a patient or as a care partner can turn it around and create a solution that will be helpful to them and to others is quite inspiring.
It's incredible. I don't think there's anything more moving than to see a patient who is so dedicated to solving his or her own problem that then bleeds into other patients. I've had the opportunity through the work with Lyfebulb to see this over and over again, and it's beyond inspiring. It's just so wonderful to see. And I'd have to say that of the summits that we've run, the patient entrepreneur challenges that we've run, this one was particularly interesting because the science was so profound and so deep, and not that wasn't profound in other summits, but this one, was just really, really deep. There were such good programs across the board. It was, clearly, Minnie, you were the winner, but it was difficult to choose a winner.
Yeah. There were many inspirational stories, but also products that hopefully will be used by many in the future.
Yeah.
John, as you think about some of these stories, and when you build education and awareness campaigns for companies, many times in the past it may not have been using actual patients, but when you see some of these stories, it resonates in a certain way. I think
it resonates in a way that you can't replicate otherwise, frankly. And I think that and at least at Havas, our inclination, our impulse is to lean into what we would describe as our human purpose, and really focus on bringing that patient voice and that patient experience into the dialogue. Even when we are doing things that are high science exchange, the voice of the patient has to ring authentically and loudly in that exchange. So it's very compelling to hear from people like Alicia and like yourself, and we have to continually seek to connect the science back to those opportunities where we're impacting patient care.
Yeah. And it's not always that, I'm speaking about we now as those looking at new technology, but I'm also a patient. But if I put on the hat of a business person or a medical person, I have many hats, I look at the unmet needs and the gaps. They're not always the same as those that the patient actually has as gaps and needs.
Totally.
And that's what's so interesting with really digging deep into and listening to the patient. So Alicia, we've had a number of conversations on transplantlife.com, which is the patient community that we launched in January of this year. And, those conversations go far beyond, side effects or drug adherence and even diagnosis. Do you want to just talk about some of the discussions? Without naming anyone, of course, or any particulars.
Yeah, so many of the discussions that I've been able to be a part of on Transplant Life have revolved around mental health and, how do I accept my body now that I have this huge scar? Or how do I go hang out with a group of friends and let them know that I have a transplant? And it's things like that the everyday part of our lives that our doctors don't necessarily see. They see our numbers in the physical side of things, but there's also a whole life that's still out there, but transplant patients now have to navigate.
Yeah, it's we often say doctors and nurses and really providers, they allow patients to survive. That's really your goal, right? To survive and to live again with a transplant, but to thrive with a transplant or to thrive with a chronic disease, there are many other components that are really more up to the peer-to-peer connection or the community, and maybe other resources, and we need to work on that too. And we did see some of the finalists addressing that as well.
Yes.
Anyone you want to mention, any one of you that comes to mind?
I think a lot of the mobile and the apps and the kind of these programs that we're actually tracking, either therapy monitoring or quality of life measures, and providing a feedback loop, I think, through the patient and physician, I think are also extremely valuable to add to that spectrum of care to make it easier and something for somebody to have like a repeat measurement analysis that you can go back and see how my last week was and this week was. I think those things are very valuable.
Yes, and also the care partner. I think that engaging with the family and the care partner is critical. for success in a disease that is so complex as transplant. And I think, for example, the Life Forward had that as a goal, and it was interesting because it came from someone who Anne Chokas, who did this because of her experience with her father. Mm-hmm. So that was a good example of addressing a demand that we may not see as a treating physician or even as an innovator on the biology side.
I think that centralization of resources and education was a really powerful connector where we recognize disparate data sources, but how overwhelming that can be for a patient and a caregiver at the time when this is a life-altering procedure and a moment in time that is overwhelming in so many ways, and it doesn't just end a year post transplant. Right. So having that that ability to connect the education and for the provider to ensure that accurate information is being shared between the multitude of different stakeholders, I think is a really powerful idea too.
Actually, that's a good point. And as a provider, Minnie, when you see these kind of patient-to-patient connections, do you get worried that there will be advice given from a patient to another patient that may not be the best medical advice? I mean, we at Transplant take that very seriously. We're not allowing medical advice to be featured on the site. We are contemplating adding a medical Ask the Expert panel or having real content that is peer reviewed and validated. But sometimes the patient-to-patient connections, for example, on Facebook and other places can be dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question because I'm not part of that part, but I know that I think with Epic and the ability for patients to get into MyChart and send messages to their providers, I think that communication has become much easier. I think we're able to communicate back, and so maybe some of those questions, if they come up, even if they're patient to patient, I think our patients are pretty savvy. I think they still come if there's anything major. They don't let anybody else touch their meds apart from their right. transplant people, which we put I think that's a great habit. So I think overall, I've not had that concern, Good. At least with our patient groups. Yeah.
That makes me feel better. I think that's very good. I do think that transplant patients are very careful
yes.
because the gift that they've been given is just such a sacrifice or it's such a big thing that they're not just going to dismiss it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, I wanted just for the final minutes here, anything that you see in the future of transplant from all your different perspectives, anything of interest that we should keep in mind? We start with Alicia. Anything that you're seeing among your community friends or on Instagram, anything that you're looking forward to in the near future?
I see so much of the community coming out and talking about the mental health side of transplant and the emotional side of transplant, and looking at it as a holistic thing and not just a new organ that's in your physical body. And that makes me really excited to see all of these things coming together to care for the person as a person and not just a patient.
Well said. Anyone else? Steve, are you seeing anything novel?
Well, I think, as I said a little bit earlier on the call, I'm really enthused about the level of innovation that this particular challenge, surfaced. As a person in private equity venture capital, where we haven't spent probably enough of our time investing in new companies in the transplant field, I'm sort of newly inspired by what's developing out there. And, again, to my point that technologies, many like yours, where we might have an earlier look at the success and outcome measures of an organ transplant, is going to, I think, push companies to put more innovation money towards, developing technologies that will, help serve the transplant community in a way that it deserves and probably hasn't been served well enough, in the last 10, 15 years. So that's what got me excited about this particular challenge.
That's great. Let's see transplant-oriented venture funds in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
John, anything?
No, I think the increased personalization and the use of data, but not in the abstract, form of data. I think for me is one of the areas that was so compelling, and that we'll continue to see advances coming over the next several years.
And Minnie, outside of Nefrosant, anything else that you're seeing? If I may ask that question.
Well, I think our next quest is to actually find the right donor for the right recipient. I think to really move beyond HLA, and I think that's something that we're working on, is to try and understand how to, because I think if you improve that on the outset, and how to find the right donor means also screen the donor to make sure that we're really doing that early detection of kidney injury also in the donor, so that the donor is healthy and then the right donor matches the right recipient. I think that pre-transplant prediction analysis is also something that I think is coming down the pike. We've been working on it in our lab at UCSF, and we're quite excited about maybe some of those applications in the future. And the last thing is, of course, in the pandemic, none of us know what vaccination means and what vaccination means for our transplant patients. So Nefrosant is on the cusp of bringing out an assay in urine for early detection of immunity to COVID, which we hope will also assist our patients in being able to understand how protected they are in this environment of the vaccine.
That is very, very cool.
The variations.
Karin, one other area that I actually saw a company today at OrbiMed, actually out of either Cornell or Columbia, I can't remember, but utilizing what we have learned from organ rejection to target tumors. So somebody thinking about why is it that certain organs go through sort of a hyper rejection phenomenon, and can we turn that technology on its ear, learning about the biology of organ rejection and actually implanting that into tumors to sort of
very interesting.
Really interesting. So we're learning from the transplant community to help fields in other directions, which I thought was interesting.
Very interesting. I had not heard of that. I've thought a lot about autoimmunity and oncology, right? So, but not.
Well, think about ABO mismatch, right? And what drives rejection of organs with ABO mismatch? What if you could convert a tumor to make it look like an ABO mismatched organ? So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up in terms of what are we seeing out there that's new. It may not apply directly to transplant, but it's the knowledge that we're gaining from transplant helping other fields as well. So.
And I'll bring one because I was just interestingly also speaking to a company today that uses CRISPR technology to set up for xenotransplant.
Yeah, I know. Genesis, I know it well.
Yes, I know it well too. Yes.
So, and we've been speaking with. It's an interesting approach.
It is.
Yeah. Anyway, we could go on. I really love this conversation. What a great group. And thank you all for not only for doing the summit last week, and of course, again, congratulations to Minnie. I'm very happy to hear that John and you've connected afterwards. That's the goal. And thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.